Hello, 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 and welcome to Nursing News You Can Use live at 5. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. I am so glad to be able to be here with you today on this June 25th, 2025. And I just wanted to let you know that, yes, we have been coming in and out during this time because of personal issues, family issues. So I just want to let you know that we try to be here every week on Wednesday to bring you the news and what's happening in nursing. And so I'm just grateful to be back. And let's start with our affirmation for today. This is coming from the You Are a Badass calendar by Jen Sincero. And this is the affirmation for tomorrow. It says, attract good, get in the give and take flow. Smile, compliment, and crack people up as often as possible. That's how you attract good, by getting in the give and take flow. Smile, compliment, and crack people up as often as possible. And I have to admit that I had a chance to laugh with a friend today. So that was very good for me to be able to do that. So I encourage you to do that. Get a chance to smile, compliment somebody, and say hello. Now, let's go ahead and get into our news for the day because we do have some news to catch up on. And also, if you have any local events that are coming up here in the Anderson, Madison County area, let me know. I'll be happy to give a shout out to your local event when we get to our event section. All right, let's get into the news. Here's our first story, and it's coming out of California from NBC7 San Diego. And it says California AG sues San Diego-based nursing facility chain for alleged understaffing. The California Attorney General's office announced Tuesday it is suing the San Diego-based Sweetwater Care nursing facility chain for allegedly failing to adequately staff its facilities. The lawsuit claims understaffing at Sweetwater's 19 California facilities has directly led to harm to patients and violated minimum staffing levels required by state law. Sweetwater officials could not be reached for immediate comment on this story, according to NBC7. The Attorney General's office claims that, per a Department of Justice investigation, Sweetwater facilities were below minimum staffing levels on more than 14,126 separate occasions between 2020 and 2024, which allegedly led some patients to be neglected because staff were too few or unwilling to provide care. Some patients were not cared for despite having serious injuries, including fractured bones that went days without assessment or medical care, while others sustained falls and other medical emergencies that were not responded to in a timely fashion, according to the Attorney General's office. The lawsuit alleges Sweetwater violated California's unfair compensation law and seeks remedies that could include monetary penalties, an injunction to prevent law violations, and a compliance monitor. So if you're in California, you have some comments on this, let me know what's going on in California with this a lawsuit from the Attorney General's office. California has a lot of laws for staffing when it comes to nursing that hopefully that we were able to implement some things like that on a federal level. However, that's not looking good, which leads us to our next story. So let me get to that. Hold on one second. Here we go. So here is our next story. This is coming, I believe, from McKnight's. Yes, McKnight's Long-Term Care News. And it says staffing mandate has one foot in the grave after judge tosses nurse requirements. A federal judge stripped the most controversial and expensive provisions from the nursing home staffing mandate late last week, leaving it alive but teetering. This is yet another major blow to the staffing mandate, so not sure if the mandate is officially dead, but it's clearly got one foot in the grave, says ATI advisory analyst Fred Bentley, who told McKnight's Long-Term Care News on Friday. That's not to say that the Department of Health and Human Services will necessarily discontinue its legal defense of the mandate, but it's hard to see how the staffing mandate survives given these legal setbacks, said Bentley. Wednesday's ruling comes from Iowa U.S. District Judge Leonard Strand vacated the requirements for specific nurse hours per resident day and a demand that a registered nurse be on duty every hour of every day. In April, in another case, a Texas judge tossed the staffing mandate on essentially the same grounds, citing agency overreach. This ruling is further confirmation that the staffing mandate does not work for American seniors and that the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid is exceeding its authority, said American Health Care Association spokeswoman Rachel Reeves. I don't know about that. That means it's not working for your budget, but anyway, we'll go on. We'll see what she has to say. We look forward to putting these unrealistic requirements behind us and working with federal policymakers on more meaningful ways to strengthen the long-term care workforce as well as further enhance quality care. I think that for me, having more people available to help and assist, given the fact that those in long-term care aren't, this isn't long-term care that people remember from years ago. This isn't a little old grandma who can walk for herself, feed herself, get herself dressed, needing somebody to help her, just remind her where she needs to go, that type of thing. That's not what we're getting. And this is what people don't realize. You're getting people that need IV antibiotics. You're needing people that have complex wounds, need turning every 2 hours, may need to be fed, bathed, 24/7 care, the type of care that you used to get when you were in the hospital is now shifting to long-term care. So they're coming in a lot sicker. So I think the model for long-term care has not caught up with the demands that are needed here. But let's go on into this article. And it says representatives of Leading Edge, which represent nonprofit aging services providers, said the Biden administration strategy and calculus were wrong from the start. Strand's ruling comes in a case filed by 18 Leading Edge state affiliates and 20 state attorneys general. We are elated that the court sided with our argument that a one-size-fits-all approach to staffing in nursing homes is unjust, said Cassie South, president and CEO of Leading Edge South Carolina. The exclusion of licensed practical nurses, and this is another part that I did have issue with. I'm going to admit that they should have put LPNs in the equation. So I think that, maybe they should have had more nursing input into this. And nursing homes was a gross oversight. We stand ready to help the new administration come up with real solutions to challenges in workforce versus blanket mandates that will never achieve the intended results. A cumulative of 3.48 nursing hours per day requirement was slated to go into effect on May 10th of 2027 for non-rural facilities and by May 10th, 2029 for rural facilities. That left out the LPN hours altogether, which I think was a critical mistake. And had they included the LPN hours in it, I think that would have made things a lot better as far as the staffing and requirement. The 24/7 RN requirement was to be implemented by May 11th in 2026. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with, right now as it stands, an RN only has to be on duty 8 hours in 24 hours. And oftentimes that's usually like your director of nursing or someone, maybe your MDS coordinator. So there's not necessarily an RN on the floor as long as you have an RN working in the building for 8 hours. That meets that current requirement. So this is where some of that was coming from. I think that they were a little short-sighted in how they looked at this and how they made this bill. So I'm hoping that they can get something in place and then maybe later on readdress some of these issues with the nursing hours. Well, what do you think? Let me know what you think about this, but I just want to share that with you. Okay, so let's look at some hospital news. We're coming up to St. Louis. And it says, this is from the Chief Healthcare Executive. Hospital in St. Louis area will close due to increasing financial pressures. After more than 50 years of serving patients, St. Luke's Des Perez, I hope I'm saying that right, hospital is about to close its doors. St. Luke says that the 143-bed acute care hospital based just outside of St. Louis will end all of its services on August the 1st. The system said it made the difficult decision due to low occupancy, changes in the healthcare landscape, and its long-term priorities. Despite the dedication and hard work of our team members, the hospital has faced persistently low utilization and increasing financial pressures made continuing operation as an acute care facility no longer viable for St. Luke's. Though this decision was not made lightly, it reflects our commitment to long-term sustainability and our vision for a stronger, more focused future in developing exceptional care from the system. So St. Luke's is a faith-based nonprofit system that operates its main hospital, 493-bed facility in Chesterfield, Missouri, along with more than 30 other outpatient locations in the St. Louis region. St. Luke's touts its pride in being the only independent hospital organization in that area. It is unclear how many people will be losing their jobs with the hospital's closure. A news release didn't specify how many positions would be lost, and a Missouri state government website that publishes notices of layoffs didn't list any information on the hospital as of Tuesday night. So St. Luke says they will work with employees to help them find other positions within the system. They mentioned that they are dedicated to their team members and supporting them. The health system said clinicians would work to provide a smooth transition for patients. St. Luke's Medical Group practices in the Des Perez will remain open to serve patients. St. Luke's first acquired the Des Perez Hospital in 2018. St. Luke's hold about 12% of the inpatient market share in the St. Louis region, trailing Mercy Hospital of St. Louis. So just to let you know, St. Luke's did have excellent ratings, according to the article. So I'm hoping that that things will work out for them, and then maybe there will be access to care for other places. I don't know. I'm not in this region, so let me know if you're in that St. Louis area region. You have any insights into this? Let me know what's happening, what's going on. So this brings us into this story about Medicaid cuts, and this is why some of these things are happening as well. So this is from Healthcare Dive. It says Medicaid and SNAP cuts could lead to nearly 500,000 lost healthcare jobs. So it says more than 1 million jobs, including hundreds of thousands of positions in the healthcare sector, could be lost if cuts to Medicaid and food assistance pass in Congress, according to a report published this week by the Commonwealth Fund and George Washington University Milken Institute School of Public Health. Across the country, 1.2 million jobs could be lost in 2029 as funding reductions to the Safety Net Insurance and Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, ripple through states. The impact would be comparable to increasing the nation's unemployment rate by 1/6, the healthcare researcher said. The healthcare industry would be particularly hard hit. Nearly 500,000 jobs will be cut in the sector, like roles at hospitals, physician offices, pharmacies, and long-term care providers. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which includes a number of healthcare provisions, including significant cuts to Medicaid, narrowly passed in the House last month. Notably, the legislation would mandate work requirements for Medicaid, requiring beneficiaries to log work, volunteer, or education hours to stay enrolled in coverage. Last week, Republicans in the Senate released their proposal, which includes steeper cuts to Medicaid through expanded work requirements and more restrictions on state provider taxes. The cuts to federal funding would likely damage state economies, lowering revenue for providers and then impacting other businesses and their supply chains, as well as the jobs and incomes of their workers. Cuts to Medicaid and SNAP would lower states' gross domestic products by $154 billion in 2029, 18% higher than the savings the bill would provide to the federal government. Additionally, the income lost by businesses and state residents would slash state and local revenues by $12.2 billion that year. Some states are required to balance their budgets, like Indiana, and they would need to raise taxes or cut spending elsewhere to make up for the losses, according to researchers. And so this is what brings us some of the things that are happening here in Indiana with a look to these Medicaid cuts on the federal level. Now the states are looking for ways that they can save money. According to Lighton Q, lead author of the analysis and director of the Center for Health Policy and Research at George Washington University, Milken Institute School of Public Health, Medicaid and SNAP benefits aren't just safety net programs, they're economic engines. Cuts of this magnitude would harm millions of families and destabilize state economies, triggering a devastating number of job losses and fiscal strain. The impact from the cuts vary by state. Those with more low income families that depend on programs like Medicaid and SNAP would be harder hit by job losses. What does that translate? That translate into your states such as, this article suggests, Louisiana, Mississippi, New Mexico, West Virginia, and Kentucky. And so it says the average job loss in those 5 states with the highest poverty rates is 1.3% or percentage points, compared with 0.6 percentage points for states with the lowest poverty rates, which include New Hampshire, Utah, Minnesota, Colorado, and Maryland. The severity of Medicaid cuts would also depend on the states. Overall, more than 13% of federal Medicaid cuts would be lost nationwide in 2029. Arizona would lose more than 21%, while Wyoming would see its funds decline by 6%. So the amount of money that you would lose also depends on your state and what you have. So if I were you in some of these more poverty-stricken states, I would definitely give a call to your state legislator and your federal Congress member, and tell them, hey, you might want to think twice about voting for this. So you better make your thoughts known now, because it's almost already too late. And unless you put the pressure on them now, that bill's going to pass. And then you can't come crying later about it because it's already done. And so if you're in a state and you oppose these types of things, make sure you vote at the ballot box and let them know what you think about all of this. But again, this is going to trickle down and cause problems, because as we're looking at this, you have to worry about what's happening with rural healthcare, rural hospitals. So here's another story here. Okay. Here's a story on rural hospitals. Says Senate Republicans battled over rural hospital relief fund to offset Medicaid cuts. So just like we just talked about St. Luke's, we may see more hospitals closing in rural areas. So according to this article by The Hill, it says Collins told reporters Wednesday that the $15 billion relief fund floated by the Senate Finance Committee is likely not the final offer from the Senate Republican leaders to address the concerns of several senators who worry the bill's cap on healthcare provider taxes could put scores of rural hospitals out of business around the country. The Finance Committee has not made a final decision. It is accurate that I believe we would need $100 billion provider relief fund. I don't think that solves the entire problem. The Senate cuts in Medicaid are far deeper than the House cuts, and I think that's problematic as well, she said. Obviously, any money is helpful, but no, it is not adequate. But I do not know for certain that that is where the Finance Committee has landed. Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican from Alaska, is also skeptical that the $15 billion would be enough to offset the Senate bill's impact on small rural hospitals, according to a Senate GOP source familiar with the internal debate. A Republican senator familiar with the Finance Committee's proposed confirmed the panel has offered $15 billion relief fund for rural hospitals. The senator said that roughly half of the fund would be available to rural hospitals around the country, and the other half would be targeted to specific hospitals chosen by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So again, you're looking at possible losses and closures of rural hospitals because of this massive cut that they are making to Medicaid. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, who has said that the Senate bill would have a devastating impact on rural hospitals in his state, said that setting up a healthcare provider relief fund is a step in the right direction, but he indicated that he would favor putting $100 billion into such a fund, as Collins has suggested, instead of a much smaller amount proposed by the finance panel. So we're going to see how this continues to play out. There's more information here. If you want to look at it, go ahead and head over to the Heal and research this for yourself. But again, it's becoming a grave to look at these types of things and what could happen. So while we're in that area, let's talk about the Minnesota Nurses Association. So then we'll take a quick break. The Minnesota Nurses Association vote to authorize unfair labor practices strike. This is from CBS Minnesota. A Minnesota nurse union voted Monday to authorize an unfair labor practice strike as thousands of employees work without a contract and others face a contract expiration at the end of the month. The Minnesota Nurses Association, which represents about 15,000 nurses across 13 hospitals in the Twin Cities and Duluth area, says the vote gives negotiators the ability to call for a strike at any time after providing a 10-day notice. Nurses say hospitals have proposed policies that they disagree with, including capping sick time at 48 hours a year. So what if you let's now most nurses work 12-hour days, right? Most nurses nowadays. So you're saying, all right, you get 4 days off for being sick a year. That's it. You can only be sick for 4 days. That's it. Implementing the ability to cancel shifts at any time. So we can just cut your pay, cancel shifts at any time. We don't have to give you any notice. We don't care if you can't feed your family because your check's short, whatever. We just cancel you whenever we feel like it. Cutting overtime pay. You work more than 40 hours. I think it's a federal law that you get your overtime pay. And replacing a long-standing affordable health care plan with a high-cost option. That's always the go-to. One of the first things they do is to get you a high-cost option. And I just think healthcare providers, we should have the best healthcare plans in the world. But I hate to say it, but we're often saddled with the crappiest healthcare plans. I don't understand that. Anyway, let's go on. So, however, the sticking point, nurses say, is that the hospitals have engaged in unfair labor practices by refusing to bargain in good faith, withholding information, and attempting to undermine union rights. We don't take this step lightly. Nurses care deeply about our patients and our work, but when leadership violates the law, refuses to engage, and puts the patients and workers at risk, we have a duty to act. The vote is a message. We are serious, we are united, and we will take action if needed, said Sydney Patterson, a nurse at Fairview, Riverside. The union says they brought plans regarding safer staffing ratios, workplace violence prevention measures, and scheduling the bargaining table, but hospital executives have refused to listen. Nurses say that the patient and nurse ratio is unsafe and unmanageable. In some instances, especially on overnight shifts, they say one nurse is overseeing 6 or more patients, which can be very detrimental depending on the severity and acuity of the patients. Nurses are also asking for more money in their current bargaining agreement, but the increase, they say, doesn't make up for the cost of living. That's not money for my back pocket. It's for the patients, right? It's human beings taking care of other human beings. We can't do this with AI. We can't do this with robots, said Erica Helling, ICU nurse at M Health Fairview Southdale. The MNA alleges the hospitals have retaliated by surveilling union conversations and refusing to provide information that is necessary to bargain. Negotiations started in March for Twin Cities nurses who are now working without a contract. The Duluth area nurses started negotiating in April and are facing a contract expiration date of June 30th. Today's announcement of a strike vote puts the union strike first, patient second mentality on full display, said Twin Cities hospital groups, which represent several hospital systems across Minnesota during the contract negotiations. I don't think so, but I know that's the way you see it. But I also look at it as a stall first, not patient first from hospitals. Oftentimes I see that. So, yeah, sorry. I'm beginning to think that there's a bit of gaslighting going on here. Again, this is a news commentary show, so you are welcome to dispute my comments if you like. But keep it classy. Keep it classy. Okay. So it says, it is disappointing that the union has taken this path instead of working collaboratively to find solutions. Okay. Well, today's vote tally does not mean a strike is imminent. A 10-day notice must be provided if the union decides it is preferable for our nurses to leave their patients at the bedside. Oh, the guilt tripping. The guilt tripping. Oh, well, the union says the nurses got to abandon their patients. Oh, stop that. Our hospitals will be fully prepared to care for patients as they must be. Our teams are focused on concluding these negotiations, reaching a fair settlement, and serving our patients, their statement goes on to say. Just, ugh. However, the nurses are accusing the hospitals of ignoring the language in the 2022 agreement, which stated that a staffing ratio could not be lessened without approval for both the hospital and the nurses. We didn't agree, and they did it anyway, Helling said on Monday. She added that nurses have been part of an arbitration process to resolve the issue for the last 18 months. And again, this is why I say stop the gaslighting. We know. We know. All right. Here's another strike notice. Nurses at Pittsburgh's largest employer run up against labor board stalled by Trump. So possible, here's some more union stuff going on. This is out of Pennsylvania from the Pennsylvania Capital Star. Hundreds of nurses employed by the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center said the city's largest employer said that they are having to fight just to schedule a union election. Meanwhile, their employer is justifying delays by citing the Trump administration changes to the National Labor Relations Board. On June 13th, a throng of scrub-clad nurses and supporters gathered in the damp shadow of Pittsburgh's iconic U.S. Steel Tower, which now bears the UPMC logo across its roofline. Joined there by a range of elected officials, including City Council members U.S. Representative Summer Lee and Chris DeLuzio, and Pittsburgh Mayor Ed Gainey, they demanded a date for the union election. We all knew that the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center didn't want us to have a voice in the hospital, but not even a vote, said Alex Levy, a nurse in the emergency department at UPMC McGee Women's Hospital, said to the crowd. The University of Pittsburgh Medical Center did not respond to requests for comment. Yeah. On May 27, nurses with UPMC McGee Women's Hospital filed a petition for a union election with the Labor Board's regional office in Pittsburgh. They have been organizing with SEIU Healthcare Pennsylvania since last year in response to problems they say make for bad jobs and worse care for patients, chronic understaffing, low wages, and high turnover. This is the same thing that we complain everywhere. So just want to say, same thing. So it's not about us, said Claire Duffus, a registered nurse in the postpartum unit at McGee Hospital. It is also about our patients. On June 6th, the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center argued that the union elections could not proceed given the National Labor Relations Board is currently without a quorum, according to a pre-hearing statement filed with the board. The agency has been without a quorum off and on since President Trump fired board member Gwen Wilcox in January, and courts variously stayed the order and reinstated her. Her case is pending. So again, this is a case of, well, we don't know what to do. We'll see. So follow along with this story. We'll keep an eye on what's happening in this. As things happen on a national level, they often trickle down to problems on a state level. And this is why I'm bringing these issues in the forefront. You need to know what's happening in healthcare as nurses. So I wanted to share that with you. Let's get to our next story right after we have a break. Ready to turn your nursing skills into a thriving business? At the Nurse Shark Academy, we give you expert strategies, real startup guidance, and the support to go from employee to empowered entrepreneur. Join us and build the nurse-owned business of your dreams. Start today and join us at the nursesharkacademy.biz. All right, here's our next story. And it says from the Seattle Times, Providence Everett hires more nurses, but cuts certified nursing assistants. Certified nursing assistants at Providence Regional Medical Center in Everett continue to push for answers after the health system announced plans to cut more than 100 of their jobs. The layoffs are part of a system-wide restructure that involves slashing about 600 jobs total across hospitals and facilities in 7 states due to financial new reality, Providence said in a statement that includes laying off or moving about 250 staffers in Washington, 170 in West Washington, and 80 in Eastern Washington, said Melissa Tizon, national spokesperson for Providence. The healthcare organization is based in Renton, but its locations in Alaska, California, Montana, New Mexico, Oregon, and Texas. Although Tizen said the changes mostly affect non-clinical administrative jobs system-wide, almost half of the layoffs in Washington appear to have hit the Everett Hospital's CNA staff. That sounds like a stupid move because we definitely need our aides, and more aides, the better. Anyway, we'll see what happens. So the labor unions that represents the CNAs at Providence Everett, the Office and Official and Professional Employees International Union, Local 8, is in the process of negotiating impacts of layoffs, including, according to union representative Byron Simpson. We have concerns about how Providence conducted the layoff process and have requested additional information to ensure full compliance with our collective bargaining agreement. Providence announced the layoffs June 12th in a statement that included Chief Operating Officer Daryl Elmucci calling the changes difficult but necessary. The layoffs will eliminate about 25% of the hospital's nursing assistant jobs starting July the 1st. Why do you think that's a good idea? According to this article, it says in Everett, the CNA cuts are partially driven by the hospital's ability to hire more registered nurses recently, Tizen said. The hospital had previously struggled with a nurse staffing crisis that meant high vacancy and turnover for registered nurse positions, which meant it required a higher number of CNAs to support a limited RN workforce. But after hiring about 500 additional nurses over the past 15 months, Providence Everett now employs about 1,720 nurses, the most it's had in 7 years. With improved RN staffing, the current RN to CNA ratio is imbalanced, reducing the need for as many CNAs. In addition, many CNAs have ended up spending their time as patient sitters, which involves supervising patients and is a role that utilizes their certification and skills. Underutilizes, their certification and skills. Sprouse said remaining CNAs are not being asked to do more, nor are new RNs expected to take on CNA tasks. Most nurses at Providence Everett are represented by the UFCW 3000, which confirmed that none of its members appear to be affected by the restructuring news. While some affected CNAs have opted for voluntary separation, efforts are underway to redeploy others into new roles wherever feasible. So we'll see what happens over this. It looks like they also eliminated about 35 per diem CNA positions. As things are changing, we'll keep you informed. Okay, so how about just a little bit of good news on the nursing front? I always like to be more balanced. This happens to be an article that I came about on, I believe it's Medium. No, Forbes. This is Forbes. This is from Forbes. And it says, why former nurses are the untapped talent your business needs. I found this kind of interesting that this was on Forbes on their website. So we're going to take a look. It says nurses know how to manage chaos, make hard calls, and keep people alive under pressure. So it's no surprise that thousands of these professionals are stepping back and asking, what's next? The cracks in the system existed before COVID-19, and now they're impossible to ignore, which is true. And this is why a lot of nurses are stepping out away from the bedside. But here's the thing, walking away from the floor doesn't mean abandoning purpose. The skills nurses bring, including clinical judgment, empathy, process thinking, are exactly what's needed in digital health, care navigation, and healthcare innovation roles, and many other sectors. The author goes on to say, I believe that career growth today is less about climbing the ladder and more about pivoting. Nurses aren't quitting, rather they're repositioning. Thank you. In fact, the care economy of nursing, early child care, and mental health is a growing sector requiring workforce development and new training pathways. The exodus of nurses from the profession is accelerating, with more than 138,000 having left since 2022 and nearly 40% more planning to exit by 2029. This isn't about work ethic. Nurses are among the most resilient professionals in the workforce. The fundamental drivers for leaving are systemic. And this is why I'm bringing this up, because wherever you are, no matter where I talk about nursing, it's always the same things. And when is leadership going to listen? When is healthcare going to make a change? When are we going to say enough is enough? Let's make some real change. So here we have it says um, chronic understaffing, always number one. Excessive workloads, including administrative, emotional exhaustion, a sense of being undervalued. Can I just say that again? A sense of being undervalued. I'm going to stop there because I just made I had a thought the other day, and I was sharing it with a nurse colleague, and I was thinking about how you can call yourself a coach, a wellness coach, right? But the minute you put nurse in front of it, it almost negates what you know. You can say, I'm an author, but the minute you put nurse in front of it, it almost diminishes the what it is. Because in society's minds, and a lot of times in the medical hierarchy, right? If you don't have that magical MD behind your name, and it's almost like as soon as you say you're a nurse with a particular specialty expertise, it almost always negates what you know, even though what you may know might be more than the doctor that's sitting next to you. And no offense to doctor. So, for example, in medical legal field, a lot of times there are wound care nurses whose expertise is wound care. This is what they do all the time, and yet a not picking on primary care physicians, but a primary care physician who may not have the expertise in wound care is seen as the expert, even though the nurse does this 24/7 every day, studied, did all of that. But because he has MD by his name, anything he says would be over what the nurse says. And what I'm saying is it shouldn't be that way. There should be mutual respect for what the nurse knows and what the doctors know. So there was just a thought that I had. I said, why is it that it's okay? Like, for example, there's I interviewed on my other show, the Nurse Academy show, the first nurse psychotherapist who has her own practice in Canada. And what we had, part of the conversation, we discussed this, is that because she's a nurse, she has to make sure she lets them know, I'm a nurse. Now, she could be a social worker, licensed mental health therapist, or anything like that doing psychotherapy, right? And there's not really that big, make sure you tell them that, you've got the licensed mental health family therapy instead of an MSW. There's none of that, right? But as soon as you put out there that I'm a nurse with these skills and credentials, you got to make sure you tell everybody that you're a nurse. So it's almost as a way to diminish what you are. And I'm not saying you shouldn't tell people you're a nurse. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm very proud to be a nurse. I'm very proud to call myself a nurse. But I think in the mindset of people that it's like, oh, you're just a nurse. And we need to change that. And that's why I say that sense of being undervalued. It's almost as if as soon as you add nurse to it, the value that you bring is automatically diminished. And that's something that we need to change in the mindset of not only the medical hierarchy, but also in our patients. And to understand that, yes, I am a nurse. And that means I have a wealth of knowledge that can help you. Anyway, let's go on. Poor management and support. Well, a lot of times we don't really teach our managers. We just want them to be, like puppets a lot of times and cogs in a wheel. So we don't necessarily invest in leadership skills for some of our managers. They don't get better. And sometimes the very people that are promoted are the bullies that shouldn't be promoted in the first place. I'm getting off my soapbox here. Workplace violence and bullying, that's another issue. Limited opportunities for advancement. This is a crazy thing. This is the same thing I was saying in my current position. Limited opportunities for advancement, a fear of litigation and legal pressures. This is becoming a very big reality for nurses now that everybody's popping up on social media and everything, recording nurses, and oftentimes recording just one side of the story. They didn't show the part where they were acting a fool and going crazy and throwing things and threatening nurses. They didn't put that on social media, but they'll put the part in there where the nurse says, I'm sorry that this is happening to your loved one, but this is the things that we can do and what we can't do. They'll put that on there and blast the nurse. I've seen it. And so in the hospital, where my husband was in the hospital, right there in the wall, it says, you can't record it. You can't record it here. No live streaming, no recording. For the safety for our patients, but also we don't want people's private information getting on there. And we don't want private information for our staff because we don't want people to be threatened and everything like that for just doing their job. And then, of course, you got the physical health risks, which we are very well aware of, but all those things are there. So, what is interesting is that this is what he says that former nurses bring to the table and why employers should pay attention. Nurses offer far more than most entry level hires. Their transferable skills include crisis management and rapid decision making, empathy based leadership and multi stakeholder coordination, compliance, accountability, and process thinking, communication under pressure and teamwork, adaptability, resilience, and optimism, clinical expertise in patient care and medical procedures, time management in high pressure environments, technical proficiency with medical technologies and digital systems. And that's just a few of those things that we bring. And that's one of the things that I talk about in our break free event, which we'll be having again. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but our break free event, and nursing entrepreneurship. These are things that you already have as a nurse and we bring to the table. So here's what he lists as 10 industries where former nurses are thriving. You have health, tech, and informatics, right? Because they need how we think, how we know. It helps them on the consumer side, or I should say the user side of technology. We have wealth of information on how nursing works and how best to serve the nurses on the floor with the technology. Care navigation advocacy. We help patients navigate the complex healthcare system, provide education to them. Insurance and risk management. Public health and policy. They should be talking to us more. Medical sales and education. We understand how the medication's used, how the product will be used, and can bring it to the consumer and the caregiver in a way that makes sense. Clinical research. Legal consulting, occupational health, education and training, and then workforce development and operations, including team coordination, onboarding, mentoring, apprentices, trainees, all these different areas that we can do that's not necessarily at the bedside. And so a lot of nurses are doing things to do that. And now not even just doing, coming into other fields, but they're starting their own businesses to do the same. And so this is what I find interesting. He says, what's holding nurses and employers back? The biggest obstacle isn't lack of availability, it's lack of imagination. Too many organizations still cling to rigid job descriptions and outdated notions of fit, missing out on the candidates who have already proven their value in high-stakes environments. I'd encourage employers to reevaluate degree and tenure requirements and to place greater value on adaptability, resilience, and emotional intelligence. Just as important as building structured pathways such as apprenticeships and supported onboarding into non-clinical roles. And let's address the elephant in the room. Just because nurses are used to high-stakes situations doesn't mean they're chasing chaos in their next career. That's the truth. Many have normalized working under pressure, triaging emergencies, making critical decisions, and managing emotional intensity. Walking away from that environment can come with a sense of loss, not just for the role itself, but for the deep identity and purpose it once provided. So again, this is from Nicholas Wyman. So you want to check it out, head on over to Forbes. I found that it's a very interesting article. And let's end right here. There's a lot more that we can go into, but just don't have the time. Just don't have the time. Let's end with this story about nurses in Indiana. This is a commentary article by Raja Ramaswamy, and I just thought about this, and I just want to end here because I think this is so important. It says, without nurses, there is no health care. Indiana hospitals face 10 to 15% nurse vacancy rate and must train 1,300 additional nurses annually through 2031 just to keep up. I went up to the ICU to check on a patient, and I saw Sarah, a seasoned nurse I've worked with for years, juggling 6 critical patients. Her eyes were tired, her steps hurried, but she still managed a reassuring smile for a frightened family. Between checking IV lines and updating charts, she whispered to me, I'm drowning, but I can't let anyone see it. That moment hit me hard. Sarah's dedication keeps our hospital running, but the strain of understaffing is breaking her and countless nurses like her across Indiana. A mother waits hours in an ER for her child's care. A patient faces delays for surgery. Nurses, the backbone of our healthcare system, are stretched to the limit. They manage unsafe patient loads, earn modest wages, and live with the fear that one missed sign or delayed response could cost a life. Many are afraid to speak up, silenced by the risk of retaliation. This is a test of Indiana's political, institutional, and moral priorities. Governor Mike Braun and hospital leaders need to restore trust among our nurses. The numbers paint a grim picture. Indiana hospitals faced a 10 to 15% nurse vacancy rate and must train 1,300 additional nurses annually through 2031 just to keep up. Meanwhile, burnout is accelerating. A 2024 survey found that 15% of Indiana nurses plan to leave the profession, citing pay and workload as top concerns. During Nurses Week 2025, frontline caregivers shared a story of chronic understaffing, mental fatigue, and a healthcare culture that treats exhaustion as routine. The pandemic did not cause this, it revealed how fragile the system already was. Leadership has failed to meet the moment. Braun's 2025 budget allocated nothing to address this issue. Instead, it prioritized tax cuts and tighter Medicaid eligibility. It's unclear if policymakers even recognize the crisis for what it is. If they do, they are certainly not treating it like one. His signing of House Bill 1004, which requires nonprofit hospitals to reduce pricing by 2029 or risk losing tax exempt status, was a modest step on pricing, but does nothing for workforce stability. No mandate for better pay, no investment in training, no plan for retention. At the same time, the legislature has capped nursing program capacity, bottlenecking the pipeline. Hospital boards continue approving massive executive salaries. Yep. IU Health's CEO earned millions while frontline nurses juggle impossible workloads with stagnant pay. IU Health holds $8.5 billion in assets and is building a $4.3 billion campus. Yet its staff face critical shortages. A 2023 study directly linked inadequate nurse staffing to high mortality rates, lower hospital stays, and millions in preventable costs. This amounts to institutional neglect. We in Indiana are already paying the price in patient outcomes and the deteriorating standard of care. Strategic investment is essential to safeguard care and retain talent. People expect their hospital to be staffed and safe. Indiana leaders must listen to the people who keep the system running and act accordingly. Here is how Indiana can begin to change things. The Medicaid funding to safe, patient-centered staffing and fair compensation, or tie Medicaid funding to that. Cap executive bonuses at nonprofit hospitals that fail to support their workforce. And he mentioned by name, he mentioned IU Health, Community Health, and Ascension must lead by aligning leadership rewards with staff and patient outcomes, not just financial performance. Invest in nursing education and retention. Raise faculty pay. Expand loan forgiveness. Fully fund a nurse resident program to grow the workforce and retain new graduates in high need areas. Protect nurses who speak out and enact strong whistleblower protection so nurses can report unsafe conditions without risking their careers. So it says these actions are necessary, evidence-based, and fiscally responsible. Better staffing means fewer errors and healthier communities. When nurses are supported, patients thrive, and the entire system becomes more stable. And so he goes on to say, we cannot afford to keep building hospitals while ignoring the people who make healthcare possible. Broad and hospital leaders must protect the workforce now, because without nurses, there is no healthcare, and without action, there soon won't be enough left to care. So that was a commentary by Dr. Ramaswamy, which I appreciate. I appreciate him saying that and seeing that. And so I want you to leave that thought. This is a good time to contact your state representatives and the governor and say, what about us? Write to them in support of nursing. So that ends all of our news for today. Let's get into a couple of bit of announcements. So our first announcement, we have some things coming up right away from Baxter Professional Services Health Education. So if you haven't had a chance to get into it as of yet, now would be a good time to get into it. We have coming up on July the 9th. It's our basic TB validation course. So now's a good time to get into it. There are still some slots available for that. And so if you are a nurse or healthcare provider in that area, like doctor or whatever, and you need to get this basic TB validation course in, now's a good time for you to get that done. We also have coming up on, I want to say it's the 16th, if I am not mistaken. No, it's the 30th. July 30th will be our TB instructor course. So if you've had your TB basic validation for 6 months or more and you would like to be a TB instructor, that course will be available on the 9th. And then we do have CPR classes that will be available, and I'll be getting back in touch with you on that one that will occur, and I'll get that back onto the schedule. So we do have CPR available as well. And then for the Nurse Shark Academy, we are going to have our break free event will be scheduled in July. So you'll be getting more information about that. As soon as I get that on the calendar, I'll be reaching out to you, or actually, my new VA, Brittany, will be reaching out and helping me to get that done. So I'm excited about that. So if you're looking to break free in 2025 and start your nurse home business, that's the event where you're going to be at. So I'll be posting information about that coming in the next week or so. So just look forward to that. I will see you in July as we kick off, and hopefully, fingers crossed, things will be going better and a lot smoother, so that we'll be here every Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Thanks for tuning in, and bye bye for now.